हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम बैक टू अवर यूट्यूब चैनल। और आज का जो हम टॉपिक स्टार्ट करेंगे, हम जॉन स्टुअर्ट मिल के बारे में बात करेंगे। अकेडमी का जो यूपीएससी सीएसई सब्सक्रिप्शन है वो बहुत ही लिमिटेड पीरियड ऑफ टाइम के लिए, उसके बाद जो है कल प्राइस इंक्रीज हो जाएगा और आपको सिर्फ 10% का डिस्काउंट जो पहले आपको मिलता था वो भी नहीं मिलेगा। तो अगर आपको चाहिए इसका डिस्काउंट तो आप अभी अप्लाई करें डिस्काउंट के लिए 10%, और आपको सिंपली ये कोड अप्लाई करना है और आपको 10% डिस्काउंट मिल जाएगा। Unacademy Aspire is providing you with all India free mock tests for civil servants aspirants under UPSC CSE Prelims 2020 of Paper 1 JS, and it will be conducted on every 10th and 25th of every month, and we are also providing you with exciting prizes and scholarship for top 50 rank holders, and it was conducted on 10 October at 10 a.m. sharp. UPSC CSE batch preparation courses has already started from 5th October 2020, and we have 3 complete batch preparation courses. The first one is bilingual, the second is in Hindi, and the third one is in English. So the in bilingual, the medium of instruction is in Hindi, English both, and you can enroll for whichever batch course you're comfortable and whichever language you can understand the subject in a better way. One subscription has like unlimited benefits, like you can learn from your home, you have unlimited access to all courses, top educators, full syllabus coverage, double doubt clearing session, live test series. Study material will also be provided to you in form of PDF format. Answer writing sessions will be done under a mentor and guidance. This is also like a one-stop solution for your complete UPSC CSE preparation, because you have structured batches with top educators. Batches in Hindi, English bilingual, late night as well as 2-year batches, 100% syllabus coverage, vast range of optionals, prelims test series with evaluation, main test series with evaluation, and we have daily current affairs practice, essay and answer writing practice. Along with that, we'll also provide you for your performance analysis also. And you will also get and we'll also prepare you for your interview also. So this is going to help you in a long term basis, that then you need to subscribe this complete UPSC CSE batch preparation course. If you subscribe now, you will get 10% off. You just simply need to apply this code and then you will get 10% off. So the Unacademy Champions Conclave was held with a power pack session by the toppers of UPSC CSE 2019, and this conclave was a must attend for every UPSC aspirant because it succeeded in the country's most coveted exam with this free to attend conclave, and it dedicated a day to learn about the preparation journey of 2019 toppers and get some tips and tricks from them who actually cracked it. So indirectly, this was like really informative for the students who really want to learn about the tips and tricks so that they can apply in their own strategy. We had 14 toppers, 10 educators, and 14 talks and discussions. T20 Daily Current Affair Test Series is completely free in this package and will be conducted at daily 7:30 p.m. And you will be provided with 20 questions for 20 minutes, and it will be for 40 marks. And after your completion of your exam, then you will get your test analysis, in which you will also get to know about your percentile also. So if you really like our channel, then please like, subscribe and join on YouTube, Telegram and Facebook. As we all know that the John Stuart Mill played a very important role in the arena of the political theory development, because John Stuart was a very high standing and he was considered as the most persuasive political thinker of the 19th century. So in the political theory we can see कि जो liberalism में एक प्रॉपर चेंज ओवर आया था, जहां से वो लाजे फेयर वाला जो कॉन्सेप्ट स्टार्ट हुआ था, वहां से एक एक्टिव रोल स्टेट ने प्ले कर दिया था स्टार्ट करने का, और वहां से एक नेगेटिव से लेके पॉजिटिव रिफॉर्म स्टार्ट हुआ जो फॉर्मेशन लिबर्टी के बारे में। और यहाँ पे जो है एटमिस्टिक से ज्यादा हम अब देखते हैं कि कितना सोशल कॉन्सेप्शन है इंडिविजुअलिटी का। अब यहाँ पे जो मिल है वो लिबरल है, और हमें पता है कि उनको हम डेमोक्रेटिक, प्लूरलिस्टिक, सपोर्टिव, सोशलिस्ट और फेमिनिस्ट के थ्रू भी जानते हैं। उनके जो इतने भी फिलोसॉफिकल ओरिजिन्स है जहाँ से वो इंस्पायर्ड हुए थे, वो ब्रिटिश एम्पिरिसिज्म में थे। अब इसमें कौन आते हैं? इसमें जॉन लॉक हैं, जॉर्ज बर्कली हैं, डेविड ह्यूम है। तो इन सब से वो बहुत ज्यादा इंस्पायर थे और इनके जो आइडियाज फॉर्म हुए थे वो इनके थ्योरी के बेसिस पे हुए थे। वो इनके काफ़ी ज़्यादा पॉपुलर है कि उन्होंने उसके बाद ये डेवलपमेंट करी यूटिलिटेरियन थ्योरी का अपने टीचर्स के साथ। जो उनका टीचर तो थे, जो हम बेंथम के नाम से जानते हैं, जर्मी बेंथम, जो यूटिलिटिरियनिज्म के फाउंडर हैं और इन्हें एक मूवमेंट भी प्रमोट करी थी और ये काफ़ी अच्छे एक्सपोनेंट रहे हैं। अब इनके जो पॉलिटिकल थॉट्स हैं वो मिल के बहुत सिग्निफिकेंटली हमें पता है वो इन्फ्लुएंस है डिस्कशन से, डायलेक्ट से, जो प्लेटो से मिले हैं, और जो क्रॉस क्वेश्चनिंग होती थी सोक्रेटिस के टाइम, और उनकी जो स्टडीज है वो रोमन लॉ से हुई है, जहाँ पे जॉन ऑस्टिन वेल्थ ऑफ नेशंस भी लिखा है इनके स्टडीज के बारे में, हमने पढ़ा एडम स्मिथ के बारे में, देन प्रिंसिपल ऑफ रिकार्डो, इन सब का ज़्यादा भी इन्हें बहुत ज़्यादा इफेक्ट करा था रीजनिंग में। He had a subsidy also of Bentham's like principle from his father, and the Bentham himself was fond of the principle of utility on the basis and his dogmas. We can also say that John Stuart Mill was also like greatly influenced from his wife, that was also known as a Harriet Taylor, whom he used to call a perfect personification of wisdom, intellect and character, because she had played a very important role in the Mill's nature that was emotionally and provided him support that he wanted. So let's talk about the critic of utilitarianism. So he criticized and modifies the Bentham's like utilitarianism because on the various factors like the moral, the motive से है, sociability से है, feeling of universal altruism पे है, sympathy है, और एक नया concept of justice जो लाए थे, जिनका idea था कि वो impartiality का था। अब इनने असर्ट करा था यहाँ पे कि जो चीफ डेफिशिएंसी थी जो जेरेमी बेंथम के आइडियाज में थी एथिक्स में, कि उनने यहाँ पे इंडिविजुअल कैरेक्टर को पूरा ही निग्लेक्ट कर दिया था और उन्हें बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रेस करा था ह्यूमन बींग्स की फीलिंग्स के बारे में और इमेजिनेशन के बारे में, जो बहुत अच्छा पार्ट है हमारी गुड लाइफ के लिए। बट जितने भी पोइट्रिक, ड्रामा, म्यूजिक, पेंटिंग और जितने भी एसेंशियल इंग्रेडिएंट्स थे वो ज़्यादातर क्या देते थे ह्यूमन लाइफ को, एक हैप्पीनेस देते थे और एक फॉर्मेशन थे कैरेक्टर के। यहाँ पे ये क्या हो गया, ये इंस्ट्रूमेंट थे ह्यूमन कल्चर के लिए। अब उनकी जो हैप्पीनेस है और जो डिग्निटी ऑफ मैन है एंड नॉट द प्रिंसिपल ऑफ प्लेजर, तो वो एक चीफ एंड ऑफ लाइफ था और उन्हें ये डिफाइन करा था कि जो हैप्पीनेस है इट इज़ बेसिकली टू मीन विद द परफेक्शन ऑफ ह्यूमन नेचर, और जो कल्टिवेशन होती है हम सबकी मॉरल वर्च्यूज पे, लॉफ्टी काफ़ी ज़्यादा एस्पिरेशन से, टोटल कंट्रोल होना चाहिए अपने एपिटाइट पे, डिज़ायर्स पे, और हमें रिकग्नाइज करना चाहिए अपने इंडिविजुअल और कलेक्टिव इंटरेस्ट से। अब जो मिल है उन्हें बेसिकली रिटेन करा था कि उनके बेसिक प्रोमाइसेस जो है वो यूटिलिटरिज्म के बेसिस पे, और उन्हें डिस्टिंग्विश करा था हमारे जो हायर और लोअर प्लेजर्स हैं जो ह्यूमन बॉडी में एक्चुअली उससे गवर्न होते हैं, और उसी बेसिस पे वो अपने डिसीजंस लेते हैं और उनके नीड्स और एपिटाइट होते हैं। अब यहाँ पे हम देखते हैं जो ग्रेटर ह्यूमन प्लेजर है इट्स बेसिकली मेंट एंड इंक्रीज नॉट ओनली merely in the quantity but in terms of the quality of the products that they enjoy or the goods that they enjoy. So he insisted on that the human beings were basically capable of intellect and moral pleasures, and which were superior to the physical ones, and they shared with the animals also. So Mill over here pointed out very clearly about the human action in three aspects. पहला जो है जो मॉरल एस्पेक्ट है जिसका मतलब राइट और रॉन्ग है, सेकंड जो है एस्थेटिक है जिससे हम ब्यूटी के टर्म्स में बात करते हैं, और थर्ड है जो सिंपैथेटिक एस्पेक्ट है जिसमें हम लविंगनेस के बारे में बात करते हैं। अब जो फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपल इंस्ट्रक्ट करा था वो बेसिकली ये थे कि वो डिसअप्रूव करे, और जो थॉट आती थी ताकि वो सबको एक्चुअली सिखा सके कि कैसे हम एडमायर करना चाहिए और या फिर हमें डिस्पाइस करना चाहिए। और जो थर्ड उन्हें सिखाया है वो बेसिकली इसने ही बोला है कि उन्हें एक्चुअली एक दूसरे को इनेबल करना चाहिए वन टू लव, पाइटी और डिसलाइक। So basically he regarded individual self-development and diversity as the ultimate ends and important components of human happiness and the principal ingredients of the individual and social progress. So over here Mill basically used the principle of utility, which was often regarded as the ultimate appeal to all the ethical questions and to support the principle of liberty. But then it was the utilitarianism, as we all know, that was based on permanent interest of individual as progressive being. And he made a very clear distinction between the toleration and suppression of the offensive practices that were there. And in case of offenses that was there against the public decency, majority sentiment would also like prevail over here. So beyond all this, we can also see that the minorities must be granted with the freedom of thought and expression, and they should have the right to live as they pleased. So now let's talk about the defense of individual freedom and individuality. So the central idea of John Stuart Mill was based on the individual freedom and individuality, and this was the key concept in his theory. So Mill clearly defended, as we know, that the individual have the right to their freedom also. So in the negative sense, we can see about the freedom that the society has basic no right to coerce or an unwilling individual except for self-defense. So they cannot enter into your freedom, and that was actually considered in the negative sense, that society has no right to come in between in anyone's freedom. So this was also like a grant for the largest and greatest amount of freedom for the pursuit of their own individual creative impulses and energy, and that was required for a proper self-development. So we can see over here that if there was a clash between the opinion of an individual and a community, it was the individual who was the ultimate judge unless the community could convince him without resorting to threat or coercion. So Mill laid down some of the grounds for that was justified to interfere in some matters, like an activity that pertained the individual alone, that represented the space over no coercion interference either from the state or from the people was also permissible, some kind of interference should be there. And the realm which will also pertain to the society and the public was a space in which the coercion could also make use of individual conform to those standard of conduct. So the distinction between the two areas was clearly stated, but the distinction made that the Mill made between the self-regarding and the other regarding action, and a distinction was made originally by the Bentham. So Mill over here, basically he tried to defend the right of individuality, where he meant that it is obviously the choice of individual whatever he wants, or whatever he or she wants to do. So as far as their self-regarding actions were basically concerned, he explained why coercion would be detrimental to their self-development. So he pointed out four important points over here. The first was the evil of coercion will be far overweight than what has been good achieved. Second, that the individual was so diverse in their needs and capacities for happiness that the coercion would be also be futile. So CEO also said that since the person was the best judge and he knows that what is good and what is bad for him or her, they are basically their best judge for their own interest, and therefore they had the information and the incentive to achieve them. And the third point over here is that since the diversity was in too good, there are other things also being equal, that it should be encouraged. And the fourth was the freedom was the main most important requirement in the life of a rational person. And so Mill contended that the positive liberty, that means the autonomy and the mastery over our skills, were basically very desirable, and it was possible if individuals were allowed to develop their own talents and invent their own lifestyle, a great deal of negative liberty. So therefore we can see that he had a very strong case for negative liberty, and the liberal state and society were also essential prerequisite. Mill over here also tried to contended that the society could limit its individual liberty in order to prevent the harm that he has done to other people, and he regarded liberty as a conscious liberty to express, publish one's own opinion, liberty to live as one pleased, and the freedom of association are very essential for a meaningful life and for the pursuit of one's own good. So his defense of freedom of thought and expression was one of the most powerful and eloquent exposition that was made in the Western intellectual tradition. And even Mill tried to defense of freedom was taught, and discussion was basically linked to the persecution of error, and even if his opinion was incorrect, it ought to be articulated in a particular manner only through active interaction, and the dialogue could help his opinion could be evolved. So otherwise they would lose their vitality and become very dead dogs, man. That is actually very prevalent in the present period of time also. So his ideas were not just subjected to the critical scrutiny that, to the other's point of view for arriving at a truth, but he actually supported individuality, for the greater advances that should be done in our society were made possible only by the creative individuals. So now let's talk about the equality between within the family and between the sexes. As we all know that the John Stuart Mill was highly influenced by the Harriet Taylor's ideas. So his ideas were basically reflected on Harriet Taylor, and whatever learning he has taken from her and how he was inspired for her. So he made some of the important like judgment and what and how can we like establish equality in the family. So Mill thought and the activism could also be like distinguished from those from all the liberal tradition that was there before. He was very distinguished because first his application of principle of liberalism was basic to question of the women. And for Mill, it was very important to improve the women's position by giving them the universal adult franchise, education, and employment opportunity was a proper step that should be taken for progress and civility. So Mill over here was also like rightly regarded improvement in the position of women as one of the major concern, and not just restricted to women alone, but for the entire humankind. So the subjection was therefore made for a strong claim for the equal status of women in three areas. First, women should be given like political rights, that means the right to vote. Second, they should be given the equal opportunity so that they can educate themselves and they can raise their voice and opinion in the public and the private sphere. And third, the employment. So employment will obviously give them confidence and give a new way for them they can so that they can enter into the public areas. So he acknowledged all the tremendous impact of the writing that was there of mentor Bentham, and his father also had his like intellectual development. For both them had to grapple with the issue that was in the course that was long drawn on the debate on the subject. So liberty and self-determination were the two themes that was figured out by the Mill's writing. He was talking about that freedom he believed was a very precious and crucial issue to all the humans' well-being. So in this context, he also said that the women are obviously the subjected sex and they were denied the access to all its own potential, and they were often subjected to the unquestioned prejudices and biases of the society. So therefore, Mill pointed out that the women's capacity were basically spent seeking the happiness not in their own lives, but in the favor of affection or affection that they're given to the other sex, which is also obviously not, they were only given to be them and only in the condition of their dependence. So the parallel between the women and the slave was used to depict the reality in the 19th century in England, where on marriage the women were basically much lower in position than their husband in both the physical being and the property. So for women, the marriage was like the option choice, either marry or face the abuses like the loss of dignity, that the subjugation was there, and that was they were entitled for it, and therefore it remained single. They will also get deprived from all the education and professional opportunity. So by choosing like any other side, they will obviously get a lot of consequences in that. So women was not just free within the marriage, and nor she was very free to remain unmarried. So it was like on the both side, it was her loss only. So Mill clearly pointed out that the opposition to sexual equality was not just based on a proper reasoning, but it was to dismiss the equality of sexes as was a mere theoretical proposition, did not lend any credibility to the argument that women were weaker and then they should be subordinate. So he agreed that majority of opinion favored inequality, but he actually contended went against their reason. So the basic for such supposition was that because they were deprived from all the generality and the practice in the history of humankind, and hence they were regarded as good. But Mill pointed out that the subordination of women was only due to the fact that they were physically not as strong as men. But in fact, the origin of women's subjugation was in physical force. Obviously, it led to the superior body energy strength of men. So subsequently, we can see over here that while this had become a virtue in men, that the opposite is namely renunciation, patience, resignation, and submissive to his part, they have been also like regarded as a characteristic of a gentle and graceful women. So women were put in a proper like stereotype or a framework that how they should be, and then only they were like they were approved in the society by other people. So we can see over here that our sexual relations, which were just based on force, gradually try to soften. And then the progress of society from status to contract, it became rest on the consent. So in the case of the pre-contractual social arrangement, we can see that by birth it is determined one's position and privileges in the society, while in the modern society it was just categorized on the principle of equality. So every individual should enjoy a greater freedom of choice and to pursue his own life and to improve his own faculties. However, we can see that women continue to be denied of the opportunities, and they were also still born to a particular place, and they were not free to do whatever they choose to do. So we can see a very paradoxical, we can as it seen that the modern world accepted the general social practice of human equality but not gender equality. So for Mill, denying women as a equal position only deemed a man. Now let's talk about the democracy and the representative government. So Mill regarded the representative democracy as very necessary for the progress because it actually permitted the citizens to use and develop their own faculties to the fully, and it promoted the virtue, intelligence and excellence. So it was also allowed that the education of citizens is like very important because it is providing a very efficient forum to them to conduct the collective affairs of community. So in this interaction between the individuals in a democracy, it has also been ensured that the possibilities of emergence of vices and recognition of best leaders can be also done. So this encouraged the free discussion, which was very necessary for the emergence of the truth, and he judged the representative democracy on the basis of how far it is, and it promotes the good judgment in terms of fair of society and by the means of existing faculties that were there by moral, intellectual, active, and there were various members and by improving those faculties. So Mill tried to reconcile the principle of political equality with individual freedom, and he accepted that all citizens, like regardless of their status, were equal, and that only the poor sovereignty could give them very legitimacy to the government. So over here, democracy was good because he considered it to be good because it actually made people much more happier and better. So Mill actually laid down like several conditions for representative government. The first was that the government could only function when the citizens are very active and self-helping character, because the backward civilization where the citizens are very passive and were hardly able to run a democratic government, it was very difficult over there. And second, he pointed out that citizens had to show their ability in order to the willingness that they want to preserve their own institution of representative democracy. And Mill also like recommended the disqualification of the three that other categories that were dependent. First, that those who were unable to pay the local taxes. Second, those who were dependent on the public welfare would not be like excluded for 5 years from the last day of the receipt for becoming the dependent on the remaining members of community for their actual subsistence, that he abdicates to claim the equal rights with them in other respect. And the third, the legal bankrupts and the moral deviants like the habitual drunkards. So he, however, like championed the equal voting rights for irrespective of their sex or color. And Mill also looked upon the equal rights and the universal adult franchise, democracy and liberty as very conditionally good. So they also like conferred only to those who had a character of a self-control and the ability and the interest in using them for a proper public good. So in On Liberty, Mill, it has basically recommended that the education should be there to establish and control by the state. But in the 19th century, the liberal thinkers basically relied on the state intervention in order to reduce the domination of church over there. And they wanted to protect the education of the children against their own parents, because it also warned against the danger that too much state involvement in education would also hamper their growth. So he also emphasized that the representative democracy was only possible in a state, and that was a very small and homogeneous, as assertion that made was actually nullified by the success of the plural democracies like India. So though the rights of the citizenship and individual became a very like a social person, but he acquired both the political freedom and responsibility. So therefore it was his concern which acquired the public realm, and then Mill tried to defend the women's civil and political rights. And it is also like constituted that one of the major contribution, like considering the argument he made with the public domain, that was also like central to the Rawls theory of political liberalism in 1993. Now let's talk about the state and economy. So Mill was actually deviated from the classical economic theory that was of the laissez-faire, which means the free market will play a very important role and will have the free market and free and no state intervention. He advocated as this very optional sense of interference, because other than gender equality, Mill also like tried to accommodate all the major intellectual streams that was there in Europe within the liberalism, and the namely like we know as a socialism also. So he realized that unless the liberalism adapted itself to the changing time, it would not be able to sustain itself. And it was to the Mill's like credit that he also like brought about the change without giving a fundamentals to liberalism. So in the principles he published in the same year, that was in the Marx Communist Manifesto. So the principle he reiterated by the principles of Ricardian in the political economy, and in this project the Mill actually simplified the Ricardian economics by making it very less determinist. So the second, he preferred that the laissez-faire as a principle to the state intervention should be in the matters of social and economic policies. And third, he said that his acceptance of socialism was within the framework of overall market economy. So he shifted in Mill's position, which was actually prompted by the revolutions in Europe in 80s, 40s, and the Irish famine that was there, and the efforts of working men's organization in order to improve their wages and conditions of the work in 1870. So when Mill basically viewed the Irish famine and the immigration of population as a result of system of hereditary ownership and absentee of proper landlord farming. So therefore he proposed the curtailment of the normal right of inheritance and the compulsory redistribution of the large holding from the absentees of the landlords to the local peasants. That would also be very efficient cultivators. So Mill visualized society as a composed of free, equal, independent and virtuous citizens who contributed their best towards the common good and would in return receive the fair rewards for their contribution. So on the other hand, he also like rejected the hereditary class system because it was inherently very inefficient and obstructed progress. So Mill also like diluted the distinction between the three social classes in the Ricardian system, and he did not like attack on the landlord class by receiving a very steady increase in the rent, but while the capitalists also faced a very diminishing returns, and the laborer also survived with a bare level of the subsistence. So point was made by the George Bernard, and later it was like furnished by the economic basis of the Fabian socialism. So Mill was very critical of the idleness and the opulence that just as his father was, and he attacked the confiscal consumption of the new middle class in the same way as he castigated the old aristocracy. So Mill believed that the policy of laissez-faire was basically very ideal, and it could also like set aside for the purpose of education, care of children, and the insane planned colonization, relief for poor, public utilities also. So the state would actually ensure that none starve, but he did not advocate the abolition of property or its equalization, because he desired there was a general norm that everyone who worked for a living should like enjoy a decent standard of living, and he should have a sufficient amount of leisure in order to cultivate one's mind. So Mill was also like attracted to socialism because his idea of human cooperation or partnership, but he was like equally keen to preserve individuality and freedom. So he did not want to like advocate the socialism by the means of production. He realized that we need to change capitalism by bringing the ethic of social welfare and cooperation. So this was also because the capitalism even then was an incentive of the self-interest, and he had not been like able to eliminate the parasitism, and he was like unwillingly to work were also like able to develop from their shrink work. So socialism with the communal ownership had a very superior method, and it was also like forced many lazy workers to produce and work. Now let's talk about on India what John John Stuart Mill talked about on India, basically his views on India. So if you know about that, the Mill's autobiography and his private letters basically indicated very clearly that India was looked upon with the Indian duties because essentially belonging to the official employment rather than his personal interest. So he wrote very little about India, but he was influenced for his father's very pessimistic views on Indian culture. He was also like skeptical like Auguste Comte and the Saint about the feasibility and success of the representative governments that will be there in Asia, including India. So the reason for this passivity of its people, which was due to the century of despotism, preventing them from taking an active posture in the public sphere, while he conceded that the Asian countries such as China and India had attained high standards of civilization in the ancient period. And presently, they were just dominated by the custom and their unresponsiveness to the stimulating the ideas of individualism and rationalism in a country. So this made the Eastern societies essentially passive and stagnant over there. So it was making difficult for them to progress on their own volition. So there was a very little difference between a liberal Mill and an idealist Hegel and a socialist Marx when it came to when it actually comes to writing and perceiving the non-European worlds. All of them were basic very Europe centric. Now let's conclude this presentation. So Mill's effort was basically there to revise and modify the utilitarianism by emphasizing on the social aspect of individual, and the need to assess the happiness was both on the qualitative and quantity also. So he was stating that liberty and not happiness was the chief end of the state, and he was trying to define the happiness that included liberty, individuality, self-development, and self-control that actually paved the way for many changes that was initiated within the English political thought and practice. So his most important concern was basic to preserve the liberty and within the democratic society. So this was a very intrinsic good in itself, and it was looked down upon the majority of tyranny and the mass mediocrity as a very opponent threat to the individuality and the liberty. So by making liberty the chief aim, he also like gave the objective of the state is basically that he established the limits of the legitimate interference by the society, and the state in this all area should actually strictly and exclusively belong to individual. So Mill visualized at the state as a moral institution that was concerned with the promotion of virtue and excellence of the individual citizen. He felt that there was a conception of good life was basically more important than devoting life on the basis of our pleasure principle.